Eric Bischoff did his podcast today with Conrad Thompson and talked for the first time about his departure from WWE. And here is a part of the comment. I don't have to go through this whole thing. He was very complimentary to WWE. He was stating that, he was honest about the fact that he did not expect this to be some 10-year job, but he was hoping that it was going to be, 2 to 3 years, and was definitely disappointed that it was shorter than it was, which you can expect, and added the fact that, he has nothing against Bruce Pritchard. He fully supports Bruce Pritchard, and
had dinner with him the weekend.
That's right. He had dinner with him he said at Bruce Pritchard's new home. And he's going to stay in Stamford until the end of November. Then he's going to Florida to spend time with his kids, with his wife, and then they will move back to Wyoming. So, there was no breaking news in all of this, more so just addressing the news from last week. But, what do you think is next for Eric Bischoff in professional wrestling? Or do you feel that the podcast will be it, that his days of being kind of a power player in wrestling, this might have been the last stop for him?
That's what I personally see. I really don't know if there's much of a role for him in companies that I think would be able to afford him, quite frankly. I doubt that he would work for an independent wrestling promotion just for the fun of it. He doesn't seem to me the type of guy with that type of passion for professional wrestling. I think he would go wherever, he could probably make a good paycheck. And I don't really see the people that are probably able to afford him to have a role for him that'll suit him. So I really don't see it other than what he's doing right now with the podcast.
Yeah, I could see him definitely, going back to, his television projects and that business that he was deeply involved with. In terms of a high level pro wrestling position, I don't know if the offers will be there.
I don't know if he wants it. Even
might not. This might have, kind of been the exit door for him. And ultimately, he'll be the one to have to answer this of how he assesses his performance during these 4 months. And does he, at this age, want to be heavily involved at this level, even if that offer were to come his way? And as I'm looking at the options, like I don't see him as a fit in AEW or Impact. And like, what are your options that you're even looking for at this point that maybe, this is kind of his swan song in terms of a higher level role within the pro wrestling hierarchy?
Perhaps, man. I thought he would have had his swan song years ago, and then all this happened. So who knows? Like, God, who
it's a great point. After the TNA run, I would not have expected him to have been. I think everyone was stunned back in June. So you can never. The one thing you cannot discount with an Eric Bischoff, and I think this goes with Vince Russo as well, is that those are two people that they marketed themselves tremendously well when wrestling was perceived to be at its hottest in most people's lifetime. And there's always that desire from companies to go back to what worked before. And I think Eric Bischoff represents that era, even though, from the results we have over the past decade, they have not been favorable.
Yeah. So we shall see. But I it's too bad. Like, he didn't have a big enough run that we would even get an interesting podcast series coming out of this. Like, we might get an interesting episode, but I don't know if there's much of a series to be had.
Do you feel that there was any opportunity that Eric Bischoff could have been utilized in like a non-creative capacity, but someone on the screen where he is a very good performer? Or do you think that is just it would be a passe role or just would not fit right now?
I think it would be that. I agree. I think he's been good in that role, but it's just, I mean, people are already getting sick of, like, anytime you see a McMahon, I don't think retreading the same type of angle with the same type of people is really going to change people's opinions. It's, at this point, I think even diehard WWE fans are pretty sick of the trope.
Yeah.
As a manager, maybe, but is he going to move to Stanford to be a manager?
No, it's kind of, they just completely wanted to divest themselves of Eric Bischoff and not, dress this up as oh, it's not a demotion. It's just we're reassigning him to something else. But I do think Eric is a very good performer on screen. I agree, though, the general manager trope is very played out. But I'll also say that it's not like they have latched on to what the new hook is. And I think that was something that they miscalculated with the draft, was you didn't get that rivalry across. And having the two warring GMs, if you were to have Heyman and Bischoff, would represent that. But I think you have to get away from that. But the rivalry is not there. And I think that's something that has left, to me, both brands very flat coming out of this draft. Like, there just does not, this is 2 shows in a row where I just did not sense a whole lot of excitement to these shows, to anything. No. It just feels like we have half the stars on each show. And we're really seeing now with the split that there's not a whole lot of people that are over at the moment.
It's something we will continue to notice in the weeks ahead. But, I really noticed on this particular episode of Raw that they are in a deliberate rebuilding phase. And I think you look who closed the show. Look who main evented this edition of Raw. It was the Street Profits. Look who got like 30 minutes of airtime. Like, it felt like it was like people like Humberto Carrillo and Sin Cara who never get that shine. But they have to rebuild because they don't have any stars on that roster. So they need to sacrifice some of these years when they have a pretty cush deal, without that much pressure on USA, that they can use to sacrifice to build new guys, to give them new exposure. And I think that's what you're starting to see.